Morning. I was glad when they said to me, let's go to the house of the Lord. No matter what we're going through, no matter what struggles we've had this week, no matter what's going on in our lives, no matter the emotional state we come in the doors with, it is always so good to worship together. We're worshiping through the week, but it's always good to worship together. And on that, anybody in here have problems? You got issues? You got things you're dealing with? Couple hands. Appreciate that. Everybody's hand should be up. I didn't ask for a show of hands. But some problems can be fixed. If your car breaks down, you go to the mechanic. If your roof starts leaking, you call a contractor. If you get sick, if it's just a cold, you go to the doctor, you get some medicine, and week and you're fine. But there's other problems that come our way that can't be fixed. There are some problems that we deal with for the rest of our lives. There are some problems that maybe it's physical illnesses or things that are associated with age that we just have to find ways to cope with. Maybe it's emotional struggles that we have or relational struggles that we have with different people in our lives that maybe it's likely not to be fixed and we just have to find ways to cope with these different problems. Some problems can be fixed and other problems can't be fixed in our lives. And eventually in our lives, no matter how much money that we acquire, no matter how much power or influence that we acquire, there's going to come a point where all of us, unless the Lord comes first, will face our end. And it won't matter the money, the power, or the influence. There's nothing that we can do to out-earn that end. And so what I want to do this morning is spend some time in 2 Kings chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5. If you will, please turn over there. We're going to talk about a story that may be familiar to us, and it's a story of Naaman, the leper. And this is a man who has everything that the world says that you need to be secure and to obtain security, but ultimately, he has an unfixable problem. He has an unfixable problem of leprosy. And so as you're turning to 2 Kings chapter 5, we're in the time of the divided kingdom. The great power of God is on clear display through the man of God, Elisha. He's doing all kinds of miracles. And we're jumping right in the middle of a section where God has been doing these miracles. And here we're going to read the account of Naaman. And so if you would, let's start just verse 1. 2 Kings 5, verse 1. Now Naaman, captain of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man with his master and highly respected, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man was also a valiant warrior, but he was a leper. Now I want to park here just for a second because I think these details that we get about who Naaman is are really significant. Naaman is the captain or the commander of the army of the king of Aram. Your translation might say the king of Syria. That means Naaman is not even an Israelite. He's a Gentile. Not only that, if you look at the history between the Arameans and Israel, and you go just to the next chapter, there's a lot of conflict with God's people or the northern kingdom of Israel and the people of Aram. So this is even an enemy of Israel, and yet he's still under God's rule. Really fascinating stuff. But Naaman here, it says he's a great and honorable man. He's very important to his master. He's highly respected. He's a valiant warrior. Did you notice why in the middle of verse 1? This is fascinating to me. In the middle of verse 1, the Lord had given victory to Aram through Naaman. That's pretty cool. We could go down that rabbit hole for a while, but I think the line that repeats in Daniel, the Most High rules in the kingdoms of men, not just Israel, he rules over everybody. But Naaman is a great man with all kinds of respect and honor from his master, from other people. He's a valiant warrior. If you want to peek down at verse 5, we'll also see he's a man of great wealth. But with all that power and influence and wealth that he has a problem that he can't fix. He's a leper. He has leprosy. He has a skin disease. It's an unfixable problem for them at this time. That word for leprosy in the Bible, it actually covers a wide range of skin conditions, but in its worst forms, leprosy is a slow, painful death sentence. There would be some social ostracization. I don't know if that's the word. There'd be some social separatedness, but the physical pain, it does nerve damage. It would get so bad that You would eventually be a walking zombie. You would hurt yourself and you wouldn't even know that you hurt yourself. You could have a gaping open wound and you wouldn't even know. And so ultimately it's a slow, painful death sentence. And Naaman has all this wealth, all this power, all this influence, all this respect, and he has a problem that he can't fix. He can't do it. And so to sort of bring this to us a little bit, maybe you're here today and you're in a situation like Naaman. Maybe you've got a successful career, a healthy bank account, a good reputation. I mean, we could go on. Maybe it's a loving family, all kinds of respect from other people. But even in the physical ailments of life, those are all good things, by the way, but even in the physical ailments of this life, Naaman reminds us that we cannot trust in the earthly things of this life to preserve us and save us. No amount of wealth or influence or respect can save us. Naaman has a problem that he can't fix. There are problems that money and success just can't fix. So this points us to an even deeper reality that I'm really thankful Mark brought out in the songs that we sang. We face the same issue, and it's a much deeper issue, and it's the problem of sin. Each and every one of us on our own, no matter how much money or respect or influence that we have, there is nothing that we can do on our own ever to fix the incurable disease of sin. And it's our own fault. We can do nothing on our own for that, no matter how much success, honor, wealth, or respect that we have. We can never out-earn or conquer sin on our own. And so, every one of us has this unfixable problem that only God can fix. Now, let's keep reading because somebody gets a suggestion to Naaman, and who that person is really fascinating to me and gives him some hope about this unfixable situation. Look at verse 2, and we'll read down to verse 6. Verse 2 to verse 6. Now the Arameans had gone out in bands and had taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel, and she waited on Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, I wish that my master were with the prophet who's in Samaria. Then he would cure him of his leprosy. Naaman went in and told his master, saying, Thus and thus spoke the girl who's from the land of Israel. Then the king of Aram said, Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. Naaman departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothes. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, And now as this letter comes to you, behold, I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may cure him of his leprosy. Now remember, the Arameans and Israel at different times in their history, they butt heads. They were enemies. They may have had a peace treaty at this point. Don't really know, but we're going to see some interesting things the king of Israel has to say about this. But even though they're enemies, the king of Aram, the king of Syria, sends Naaman to the king of Israel with this letter here. And it also says they had captured a little girl from Israel. We don't get to know what her name is. I'd love to know what her name is. But they had captured a little girl from Israel, and she's a slave to Naaman's wife. Now, we don't know. This isn't there. But maybe Naaman's a good master. Maybe Naaman's wife is a good master to this little servant girl, because this little servant girl is concerned about the well-being of Naaman. She wishes, that my master were with the prophet in Samaria, because then he would heal him. It's really an amazing thing. It shows a faith that she has, at least, that this prophet, by the power of God, can heal this unfixable, uncurable disease of leprosy that Naaman is facing. And so this unnamed girl, we don't get her name. I wish we did, but she gives a message of hope. A message of hope to Naaman. And so it sort of goes through his wife, and then maybe his wife tells Naaman. We don't have that exchange. But Naaman goes to the king of Aram, to the king of Syria, and says, Thus and thus spoke this servant girl from Israel. This is what she said to me. And so we see that respect and honor that Naaman has from the king of Syria. If I say Israel, I'm sorry. We see the respect that he has for Naaman, because he says, I'll write a letter for you to go to the king of Israel. Go do this thing. And then let's notice the wealth, the gift that he gives down in verse 5. Let's talk about this gift. Here's just a point of comparison. When King Omri bought the site where the capital city of Samaria would be built, he paid 2 talents of silver. And that's in 1 Kings 16. He paid 2 talents of silver to buy the site where the capital city of Samaria would be. Naaman brings 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothes. Your translation may say 750 pounds of silver and 150 pounds of gold. This is an exceptionally rich gift that he's bringing. Do you think the message of hope that maybe there's a chance for healing is valuable to him? Yeah, this is an exceptionally wealthy gift that he's bringing. And so there's this opportunity where maybe he'll be healed. It's worth it to him. So he brings the letter to the king of Israel, and it states why Naaman has come. Now, I think the king of Aram, maybe Naaman himself, assumed that the prophet would be maybe part of the king's council or part of his entourage, because that's the way it worked with most nations. You know, whoever your prophet is or who your prophets are, they're kind of in cahoots with the king. Well, that's not the case in Israel. How many good kings were in Israel? 0. And these prophets have actually been rebuking the kings for their lack of faith to God. And so this letter is brought to the king of Israel on behalf of Naaman. Now, one of the things I want to point out about this, it's amazing to me that this message of hope that gets to Naaman, who does it come from? An unnamed servant girl, a captive, gives this message of hope to her captor. And so an application for us today is, you don't have to be someone of renown. Your name doesn't even need to be known. All you have to do is point people to the power of God. And so for us, please don't ever underestimate what God can do with one conversation about the power of God. Here's this unnamed servant girl who gives a message of hope to her captor. It's amazing to me. Okay, let's keep reading though. Remember, there's this letter brought to the king of Israel. Let's see the reaction of the king of Israel to this letter. Look at verse 7, and we'll read down to verse 9. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man is sending word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? But consider now, and see, he's seeking a quarrel against me." It happened when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent word to the king saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Now let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and his chariots and stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha. So Naaman goes to the king of Israel. He's brought that letter. And again, probably because he assumes the prophet is going to be a part of the king's entourage or council, however you want to say it. And here's the king of Israel. And to his credit, he realizes, why does this man come to me? Am I God? Do I have the power to do this? No, I don't have the power to do this. Even the king of Israel realizes this is an unfixable situation and only God can fix it. There's nothing that the king of Israel can do. To his credit, remember, he's still a wicked king, but to his credit, he knows he has no power to heal. But then that second line I think is really interesting. It almost seems like this is a pretext for war. So here's the king of Aram, the king of Syria. He's sending me this respected military commander, and he's got this unfixable problem. And then when I can't fix it, okay, well, he's going to start a war with me. So he's just starting a fight. That's what this is all about. So he tears his clothes. And when Elisha hears about this, why are you tearing your clothes? It's almost like why do you have such little faith? Send him to me. He'll know that there's a prophet of God here in Samaria. And so you see Naaman come with his horses and his chariots, and he stands at the doorway of Elisha's house. So he comes in the full pomp and circumstance of the great military commander that he is, and he is right at the doorway of Elisha's house. Now let's keep reading, because I think the way that Naaman expects this to go doesn't go anywhere close to what happens. So let's read here. Look at verse 10 through 12. 10 through 12. Remember, his entourage is at his doorway. Verse 10, Elisha sent a messenger to him saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will be clean." But Naaman was furious and went away and said, "Behold, I thought he'll surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned away and he went in a rage. So again, remember, verse 10, Naaman and his posse with his great chariots and all of the gifts that he has, they're at the doorway of Elisha. And Elisha doesn't even come out. Did you notice that? He sends a messenger to him. Now, that's kind of like a slap in the face to this man of great respect. The man of God's not even going to come out and talk to me face to face, man to man? What in the world? And then the guy says, "Yeah, go in the Jordan and dip 7 times and you'll be healed and you'll be clean." And we see he leaves. He's furious. He's in a rage at the end of these verses that we just read. He's just traveled all this way. He brought this generous gift. Elisha doesn't come out and talk to him man to man. And then go dip in a river 7 times? What's this guy talking about? And we get to see the heart of him. But first, it's a prideful response. Do you see that? It's a prideful response that he's doing here. Verses 11 and 12, we get to know why he's so mad. One, he expects Elisha to come out to him. He didn't do that. Two, to stand before him, maybe in some grand stance, I don't know, but stand before him. Three, to call on the name of Yahweh his God. Four, to wave his hand over the leper spots. And then five, he would be cured instantly. So it seems like Naaman really thinks he's worthy of some grand miracle to take place exactly the way that he expects it to be. You can almost say he feels entitled that as a great man, there should be some great miracle that takes place for this healing to happen. Instead, he's told to go wash 7 times in the Jordan River. There's nothing impressive about that. There's nothing wild about that. Just go wash yourself 7 times. And he mentions the rivers of Damascus. Those are much superior bodies of water than the Jordan. So if it's just about washing in a river, I didn't have to travel all this way. I didn't have to bring this gift. Why couldn't I just done it over there? So this prideful response that we see from Naaman, his offense isn't really about the quality of a river, but it's really about the simple, humbling command that comes from the man of God, that he doesn't think is worthy of a man of his status and his position. So God, I think, deliberately chooses something that he knows is humbling to Naaman to see how he's going to respond. And boy, did it strike Naaman's pride nerve. At the end of verse 12, he leaves in a rage. He says he leaves in a rage. This is the same man who has traveled all this way, brought this tremendous gift because of the opportunity of healing that's so worth it to him. But after hearing the simple and humbling command of the man of God, he leaves in a rage. Now, many of us, I'm confident, know how this story ends, but really think about this. Naaman could have subjected himself to a slow and painful death, all because he would refuse the simple and humbling command of the man of God. Pride has always been one of Satan's greatest weapons that he uses against us. Really, maybe just like Naaman, we don't mind the blessing. We don't mind the healings. We don't mind the good things that God gives to us. We just don't like God's terms for it. Maybe God says, do this and then this, and we just don't like the do this part. We just want the then this part at the end, the blessing at it. For us, we may reject God's plan, God's design, or God's will for us because it's too simple, or because it's too beneath us, or too beneath what we think that we're worth. A prideful response to God will kill us. I mean, really think about it for Naaman. If he leaves and doesn't come back, he's a dead man. Pride will kill us. We must come to God on his terms. Okay, let's keep reading because some more unnamed people are going to give him some advice and get him to think about this. Look at verse 13 and 14. Verse 13 and 14. Then Naaman's servants came near and spoke to him and said, "My father, had the prophet told you to do some great thing, some difficult thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean?" Verse 14, so he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. This is so cool. Some more unnamed servants, they go to Naaman wherever he had gone in his fit of rage, and they speak to him. And they speak to him with great respect and great kindness. This is not a shouting match to get him to face up to what just happened, but these servants start with "my father." Again, maybe Naaman's a good master. Maybe he is, because one, these servants feel comfortable going to him and talking to him after he's just left in a fit of rage, and they kind of mildly rebuke him here, don't they? They say, if he'd said do some great thing, some really difficult thing, you would have done it. But how much more? Here's this simple thing. Go wash and be clean. And to Naaman's credit, we don't get the verbal interaction of what happened here if Naaman said anything. But verse 14, he does it. He does what they tell him to do. He does what the man of God told him to do. So now we have a humble response. First was prideful response, and now we have a humble response. And nothing changes until Naaman obeys what the man of God had told him to do. There are problems that only God can fix. And so he goes and dips himself 7 times in the Jordan River, just like Elisha said, and his skin was restored. And what's so amazing about this, his skin wasn't just healed to where, I don't know how old he was, but he has the tough skin of a mighty valiant warrior, but now the leper spots are gone. No. It goes much farther than that and much farther beyond his expectations. His skin was like that of a little boy. So much greater of a healing than probably what he even expected. So what do you think Naaman is thinking now? Do you remember how he just left the man of God's house and the servant who was talking to him in a fit of rage and fury? And now he's got the skin of a little boy. I got to go make this right. And that's exactly what he's going to go do. And so he goes back to go see the prophet. Look at verse 15 with me, verse 15, and we'll read down to verse 19. When Naaman returned to the man of God with all his company, he came and stood before him and said, "Behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. So please take a present from your servant now." But he said, "As the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will take nothing." And Naaman urged him to take it, but Elisha refused. Naaman said, "If not, please let your servant at least be given 2 mules load of earth. For your servant will no longer offer burnt offering, nor will he offer sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord. In this matter, may the Lord pardon your servant. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter." Elisha said to him, "Go in peace." So he departed from him some distance. Now, there is a much different person that comes back to the doorway of Elisha's house. There's a much different Naaman that comes back because there's been healing, but there's also been transformation. There's been a healing for Naaman, but there's also been a transformation in who he is. What Naaman says here is just so important. He comes back and he says, "Now I know there is no God in all the earth except for Israel." Now, I wonder about this. How does he know that? Yes, he's just been healed, but how does he know that? I imagine, it's not explicitly stated here, but I imagine, do you think that Naaman had maybe offered some offerings to some false gods for healing? Do you think maybe he went and saw some prophets and nothing happened? But now, much simpler command maybe, and we're going to see it costs him nothing. But now he's healed. And he says, "I know there's no other God but the God in Israel." And so Naaman has experienced a taste of the awesome power of God, Yahweh. And so he asks Elisha to take this present from him. And notice too, Naaman calls himself Elisha's servant this time. Do you see that? I think it's a very different Naaman that comes back to Elisha. It's a very different Naaman. But Elisha refuses to take it. Even though Naaman keeps urging him, he refuses to take the gift. This healing from God was free. Naaman didn't even have to pay the massive price that he was willing to pay for this healing. This would be probably a big contrast to the false gods and the prophets of those false gods that he may have gone to before this. So it's just emphasizing to Naaman even more, Yahweh is different. He's the only one true God, and even his servants are different. In verse 17, Naaman then asks for as much soil or dirt or earth as 2 mules can carry. And why that is, it's thought that a lot of the gods of the nations were sort of bound to their own territories. Now, is that true of the God of the universe? No, it's not. Does Naaman know that? I don't know. But he's determined to do something different here. He wants this earth probably to set up a sacred place because he has set his heart, I am going to make no offerings to any other false gods. The only offerings and sacrifices I'm going to make are to the Lord, to Yahweh, the one true God. So does he fully understand everything at this point? No, he doesn't. But look at his heart. It's a wonderful heart. He is determined there's only one God that I'm going to acknowledge from now on. And he asks for pardon when he has to go into these places of idolatry while he's serving his master, the king of Aram. He asks for Elisha. He says, "May the Lord pardon me in those things." Does Elisha say, "Nope, not going to happen"? Elisha says, "Go in peace." How amazing is that? It's incredible. And so God's gift of healing could not be purchased here. The mercy of God is not for sale here. All it takes is simple obedience to what he said. Naaman is transformed. And so for us today, brethren, if you've been healed by the mercy of God, something that you couldn't pay for, if you've been healed by his mercy, can people see the transformation in us? Are you a Christian in name only, or can people see that your loyalties, your priorities, and everything about you has changed? Or are you exactly the same as you've always been? We need to be transformed into the image of God. And I was going to add another point here and finish out the chapter, but I think we're going to stop there this morning. As we get to close this morning, Naaman found out that the greatest problem that he had at that moment anyway was his leprosy that couldn't be fixed. None of his power, his wealth, or his reputation could change that. And there are physical situations that we can get in where our power, our wealth, our influence can't fix those things. But what we really need to learn from this is that it's the same thing with sin. The same God who cured Naaman of his leprosy, which was an unfixable problem for him, has provided us a cure to a problem that we can't fix on our own. And that cure is Jesus. The question is not whether God has provided a cure. The question is whether we will come to him on his terms. And so if you have not come to Jesus yet, your greatest problem that you cannot fix on your own, there is nothing that you can ever do to earn or achieve enough to fix the problem of sin in your life. Let me be the little servant girl this morning. Let me put it this way. Here's the message of hope. Jesus has taken on the judgment of sin that you deserve, and he offers you what you don't deserve, which is his grace and mercy. He's already revealed the cure so that your problem of sin can be taken away. And he says, like Mark 16:16, he who has believed and has been baptized will be saved, but he who has disbelieved shall be condemned. Will you have a prideful response to that, or will you have a humble response to that? If we can help you in any way, there's an opportunity now. Come to the front while we stand and sing.